So like most of my peers, I started studying for STEP in March, and things were going pretty well. I mean, STEP is horrible to take and it's really hard to study for. But, going to the library every day, everything was fine until, different policies started to be rolled out, obviously for really good reasons, social distancing and the stay-at-home order. And so, I started to stay home and I was studying, and I decided that I was going to buckle down and I was going to be able to make it through as long as I kept my head on straight and continued to move forward. Everything would be okay. And it really didn't take long before I realized that that wasn't a realistic goal. I had to look at my priorities about what was most important to me, because my mental health really started to go down the drain, because staying home alone, I don't have any roommates, not being able to see anybody, besides going to the grocery store every few weeks, really took a toll. And so I decided that taking STEP wasn't going to be my first priority. So I took a step back and I decided I wasn't going to study for however long it took for me to, get back on track. And so I decided to continue with the research that I was doing with sex trafficking, but kind of take a different direction, because this is such a unique time for everybody. And I wanted to look specifically at how COVID was affecting marginalized communities in Columbus, one of which is sex trafficking victims. I knew that they were going to be greatly impacted, but I wanted to know how. It turns out that they've been selling their phones because they don't have any money, and I wanted to see how their interactions with clients were different. So started looking at that. I also wanted to look at how COVID was affecting inmates and prisoners in Ohio, because Ohio is one of the few states to actually test a lot of its prisoners. And so I wanted to see what the rate was, because a lot of public data has just been sent out. So looking at all of that, and that's primarily what I was doing when I wasn't studying for STEP. And then George Floyd was murdered a few weeks ago. And I couldn't get through the whole video. It was horrific. And so I decided that I was going to go to the protests in Columbus on Saturday. And I'd been to a bunch of protests in Los Angeles. I've been pretty socially active for a while. But this one was different, because there was no permit given for people to actually be at the State House. So everybody had to stay on the sidewalks. But everybody was outraged. It didn't happen in Columbus, but it didn't have to have happened in Columbus. This is a problem everywhere, and I think that we're all realizing that now. But I showed up to the protests, and maybe within an hour, I saw somebody get pepper sprayed. And then within, half an hour of that, I was pepper sprayed. Everyone was pepper sprayed. They started throwing tear gas and started shooting rubber bullets. And, they were in riot gear, and there was a SWAT team, for peaceful protests. Like, no one was out there with any weapons, or, we were just using our voice, which is our right. So it was really jarring to see. And then things started to escalate, and they started, the horses came out and they trampled people while also pepper spraying them. And I was across the street from an alleyway, and I saw some police corner some people in that alleyway. And you could just hear the echoes of screams of people begging for help and begging for them to stop. And I still kind of hear it, and it's horrible. I saw a medic run in. She had her whole getup on. She had a badge. She, showed it to the police who were guarding the opening of that alley, and without any warning, they just pepper sprayed her in the face, and she was just trying to go help people. And I was like, I got home from that day, and I just, tried to wash off the pepper spray, and my skin burned so bad. And I started to look at the current events and the past events, looking at what America currently is about. and I realized that we're in the civil rights movement part 2. You know, not everything was fixed in the 60s when the Civil Rights Act was passed. And I know that we really hold Martin Luther King Jr. up, you know, in a really high esteem. And he did a lot. But the fight hasn't ended. And the fight hasn't ended for most Black people and people of color, but it ended for white people because, you know, we did enough. And it's just been really jarring to look at where we're at. And so I decided I wanted to do anything that I could. So I continued to go to protests, and I took pictures and I documented, and I wanted to make sure that people didn't forget about George Floyd. I wanted everyone to see everything that was going on in Columbus, so that they can know we're not forgetting, we're not done. This is a fight that we're planning on fighting for a really long time. And so I went to city council meetings. I've been going to Senate committee meetings about policy changes to make sure that racism is declared as a public health crisis. And, you know, even like the communities that I'm in right now, I lead a workout group. And so we talked about, you know, on a Zoom meeting, what racism looks like in the exercise community and in running, because I think that a lot of us have felt like we're above racism, or, you know, that we're not prejudiced. And because of the very fact that we have institutionalized policies that keep Black and brown people from entering, you know, medical school or you know, even our exercise groups, it's much more than individuals being racist. And so I've also looked at how our healthcare system is, and healthcare providers in my future place as a doctor, what it will look like and why I got into it. And it's made me a little nervous that seeing that not everyone cares about social justice as much as I do, and realizing that this isn't something that everybody cares about. And it feels like it's gonna have to be in order for things to change. It's gonna have to be something that we all care about and something that we're all fighting for in order for George Floyd to have not died in vain. Because he's not the first. And he's not the first to be caught on camera either. And so I'm nervous that people are gonna forget about George Floyd, and people are not gonna be thinking about Black Lives Matter movement. I still have hope, though. I mean, you know, there are a lot of people talking about how the way that we're protesting, that's not the right way to instigate change. But I mean, if you look at when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, there were 6 days of riots that caused $47 million in damage. And 6 days later, they passed the Civil Rights Act. And in 2 weeks of citizens going out and protesting, a lot has changed. I mean, Los Angeles is threatening to cut like 3/4 of the police department budget. And, you know, different policies are being enacted, and we're all looking at the institutional policies that we all have and how that affects people of color in America, which is not something that we've talked about, you know, at all, or, you know, just a little bit. And so I'm nervous, but I'm also really hopeful, because I've seen a lot more people fight for this than I ever have. And that's the way that we're gonna make change. So I just hope that we don't forget about George Floyd or the Black Lives Matter movement, because this isn't over.